Happy Earth Day!
Stone carnivores.
Wanted to use a
From the
method
past.
that didn't produce extra waste, like with papers and stuff. Hell yeah. Hello and happy Earth Day. I am Illuminati Mystex, but I'm sure you know that by now if you're seeing this. And this is...
Stone carnivores. From the past.
And I'm here to help us understand what's going on in the world by reflecting on what's already gone on in the world. So today I want to discuss Earth Day. For the occasion, I decided that I would go wasteless for my weed consumption and go with like an all mostly environmentally conscious fit, minus maybe these, because I need to see. Vintage, handmade, gifted, thrifted. I mean, the whole fit, and it looks good, doesn't it? This is locally purchased. These two are a little more questionable. No makeup, all natural. You know, just feeling it. Happy Earth Day. So what about Earth Day? How did we get Earth Day? And like, who made it up? Who decided it? How did it, and does it really do anything? Is raising awareness even really making a difference in the world? Well, to answer all those questions and more on this, the Earth Day special. April 22nd, 1970 was the first ever Earth Day. It was a day designated to the up-and-coming environmental movement that was taking shape in the late 60s. Up until that point, there was very little information on the matter to the public, other than the incredibly popular and informative book by Rachel Carson, Silent Spring, that was published in 1962. Obviously, one book, despite its best-selling status, wasn't really enough information to change the minds of people everywhere and the government in the ways that it had been viewing and dealing with industrious living. The initial movement was initiated by protest of the automotive industry. Back then, cars ran even dirtier than they do now because they were still running on leaded gas. People didn't even know what they were breathing in, and they breathed it in willingly. Not only was pollution completely normalized, but it was even glamorized. People were supposed to be grateful that they had to deal with that unpleasant smell because it meant that they were successful, or they should be happy for the person driving because they were successful. This pollution from these terrible, dirty cars was literally seen as something to be sought after. They had no idea what they were doing. This is the same reason you could smoke inside of hospitals for so long. I mean, what was anybody really thinking? They weren't thinking. While this wasn't common knowledge, there were enough people dedicated to the cause to start to build something. The real tipping point, that was in 1969 when there was a huge oil spill in Santa Barbara, California. This incident had eyewitnesses that included Junior Senator Gaylord Nelson. It was the straw that broke that camel's back, and he couldn't stand by any longer. He was in office as junior senator, and he realized he needed to use his political advantages and platform to start demanding change amongst the government. I mean, he really was one of the first, if not the first, I guess, Nader and Gore may be contenders, but if it weren't for Gaylord Nelson, I mean, we would not have the same kind of progression on a political scale that we do today. Obviously, there are people who have upheld their environmental practices and have been showing respect to the earth and do consume naturally. Looking at natives, So while we're at it, maybe just stop criticizing them for the way that they live. You think veganism is the answer, but honestly, where does your vegan food, where does your vegan food come from? You don't know because you don't want to know. So let's not criticize that fucking whale that they just hunted to feed themselves in areas in which food does not grow and people do not ship to. Okay? You want to bark vegan. It's not the only answer. Just because it's a good answer for you, just because it's an option for you, doesn't mean that it is across the board some kind of godsend that everyone can adhere to. Moving on. Teach a man to fish. Isn't that what Jesus said? So if you see a fisherman trying to eat, maybe don't preach that he shouldn't eat meat. Okay? Veganism isn't the only way. There are plenty of things that we can do to reduce our carbon footprint, to make good decisions. But if somebody is eating an animal that didn't come out of a factory, it is not the CO2 crisis that you're used to. Just know that, okay, as you move forward on your fight for environmental rights, changes, and health. Despite the efforts that certain people were making in their daily lives, it wasn't enough to stop the damage that was being done. Of course, there's still way more damage, way more people, and way more work to do now. But at the time, this was a very progressive moment. And years later, 30 years later, 40 years later, 50 years later, we still deal with oil spills. Let that sink in. Nelson knew it was time to take action on a political level. He collaborated with Congressman Pete McCloskey and activist Dennis Hayes to create the first official Earth Day. Despite their varying backgrounds, McCloskey being a pretty conservative Republican and Hayes being a radicalized protester, the team worked together to organize an informative discussion on campuses all over America. I mean, back then, because there really wasn't an environmental movement and there wasn't really anybody rallying for it in a political way, there was no political affiliation like there is today. Some people just think, oh, this is the left or this is liberals, or I don't really know. I don't get super involved in politics, okay, but I get what they say and I get accused of things that are not necessarily true of me for feeling passionately about the environment. I'm a humanitarian. Do not get it twisted. So it didn't matter that we were conservative and radical or left and right at the time, because everyone came together and recognized that there was a situation that needed to be dealt with. It's nature, it's Earth, it's the planet. I don't know why it's become an issue that is divided amongst sides. But back then, people knew what was right. And stopping this excessive and uneducated pollution into the world without knowing what was going to happen was more important than anyone's political agenda. The team grew, and so did the Earth Day teach-ins. It was an immediate victory. There was a whopping 20 million Americans that showed up that day. I mean, there were people everywhere demonstrating, protesting, rallying for the cause. It was a time when environmental cause had no political affiliation, no hidden agenda, and no restricted accessibility. It was something that everyone was involved in, no matter what walk of life they came from. People heard what was going on and they immediately wanted to do something about it. It's not like it is now, where they're asking, who do you work for? And who do you vote for? And where are you from? And why are you here? They didn't care. They heard the Earth is in danger. I'm breathing in toxins. Cars And they listened because it was science, and it was passion, and it was importance, and it was humanity. Not like it is today. Everybody's trying to make a buck, and for what? We're just trying to save the planet. Same. Beyond the success of these events, the government responded almost immediately, and this is how the Environmental Protection Agency, or EPA, was created. Numerous laws and acts were passed because of Earth Day. The results were incredible, and I don't think anybody expected that, and this truly was the beginning of a green movement.